Welcome to Q&A with Doctors A and J, brought to you by Alterman and Johnson Family Chiropractors.
Hello, everybody. I'm Dr. Franca Alterman with Alterman and Johnson Family Chiropractors. In today's episode of Q&A with Doctors A and J, we continue to bring you some of the most relevant elements of what we consider the chiropractic lifestyle. And today we have as a guest a local pediatrician that is in practice with somebody else that we did a great interview with recently, Dr. Valerie Miles. And this is Dr. Dhanu Sant. And if I didn't pronounce that right, maybe you can correct me, but hello and welcome to our episode today, Dhanu.
Great. Thank you so much for having me today, Dr. Altman. I really appreciate the opportunity to be able to speak with you and, just share some information that can help keep families and children healthier. So thank you so much for having me.
Great. So let's start by giving us a little bit of background. And before we talk about actual things that people can do, just tell us a little bit about where you relocated from. You're a new person in Jacksonville. Yeah. So where did you come from and why did you want to move here?
Yeah, so I, just a little bit of background about my training is that I trained at The Ohio State University in Columbus, Ohio. That's where I was raised and lived for many, many years. Did my training at Ohio State, and then I did my medical training at Columbus Children's Hospital and got my certification as a pediatrician. And so I practiced there for a number of years in a large group practice of conventional medicine practice for about 10 years. I was a partner in that practice. And then I decided to open a integrative pediatric practice, a holistic pediatric practice in Columbus in 2008, 2007. And I did that mostly because I had been doing a lot of yoga training and practicing yoga. And I was really interested in the idea of bringing natural remedies to my practice. And yoga helped me to kind of solidify that a little bit. And I also had a personal connection in the sense my grandfather, who was a general surgeon, so very conventional, but in India, and he always used Ayurvedic medicine as part of his practice. And so I've always been inspired by that. And so I wanted to bring that into my practice. And so I did that in 2008 with Whole Kids Pediatrics, which was the first integrated practice in Central Ohio, actually. And so I did that with the intention. My concern became over the 10 years that I was in my large pediatric practice about the number of prescriptions I was writing. I was just not having the time that I needed to spend with families to talk about the things that I felt were really important, with sleep, nutrition, and probably nutrition being my biggest focus. And so that was how I came to an integrative holistic viewpoint for medicine and medical care. And then my relocation to Jacksonville was prompted by several things. My husband and I have been talking for a long time about living somewhere warm. And the other piece was that my parents were getting older, and my mom unfortunately has Alzheimer's dementia, and so they needed more care. And so with that, I decided to relocate to a warmer climate with them. So my parents now live with us, so we're a bigger joint family where we can care for each other in a way that was different than when we lived in Ohio. And so, and of course, I wanted to live somewhere warm. Sunshine is always good. Ohio is cold and free, so don't love that. And finally, the piece of it was also, as you mentioned, Dr. Miles, who you had on a few weeks ago. She and I have been friends for a very long time. We met at a conference many years ago. And so we partnered to start ThriveWell Pediatric, which you can check out our website at thrivewellpediatrics.com. We've got lots of information there, but we are an integrative practice here in Jacksonville.
Okay. One question that I'd like for you to clarify for people who may be watching, the word integrative, holistic,
yep.
Tell us what that actually means. What is an integrative pediatrician, for example?
Yeah, so integrative, I think it can get, really muddy sometimes. And I agree, the holistic word can get very muddy at times. For me, what this has meant is that I started off in a very conventional training using, lots of prescription-based medicines, which are totally relevant and fine when they're appropriate. But my concern with them became the fact that there are side effects to a lot of the prescription medicines, especially when we're talking about children using them. And also just trying to understand the body's natural healing abilities and to be able to combine that. So the integrative piece for me means bringing to the table conventional medications when appropriate, but also using natural remedies such as herbal medicine. But I also have recommended many times, chiropractic care, such as your care that you provide, Dr. Alterman, and, whether it be osteopathic care, also, just using Ayurvedic medicine and other homeopathic remedies. I also use a lot of yoga in the practice. So for patients, for example, who have asthma, bringing in a different way of learning how to breathe can be really effective to help their disease process. So that's what the integrative to me means, is not throwing out all the Western medicine that I learned in training, but blending it together with natural remedies for the best effect and the most optimal care for my patients and families.
I love that. I love that because you become the well-rounded person that can direct parents to the best avenues of help for their children. And I think that is something that is so needed in our culture right now, because there's just too many, the scale is tipped over too much onto the pharmaceutical side of things and not enough on the natural side. So this is a great thing that we have you guys now in Jacksonville available for our families. I would love to do another interview with you and Dr. Miles so that we can talk a little bit more about your practice style, because that is also something that is very new and very creative. And I think that it's an awesome concept, but that will be a topic for another time when I can have both of you on. Today, I would really like to dedicate this episode to giving families out there that are healthy and want to stay healthy. So from a natural and holistic point of view, advice that you can give them in order to stay like that. And then the second part, we can talk about families where there might be people that are either infected with COVID or with some other respiratory infection, and what kinds of things they can do at home so that they might be able to just take care of it without having to go to the hospital, without having to get into all other areas that are a little bit tricky right now.
Yeah. Well, thank you for that. Yeah. So I think that the biggest thing about staying healthy is, for me, the biggest thing that I've educated and tried to educate my families about is a healthy lifestyle, and kind of creating a healthy lifestyle for a whole, lifetime, basically. And so one of the cornerstones, of course, is, nutrition. And I think that's where it really, for me, really starts. Obviously, exercise is really important. Sleep is important. And those are, cornerstones of building blocks for good health in general. So wherever, families can keep their kids active outside as much as possible. So even though we're right now in this self-isolation kind of place, we can still go outside a little bit, breathe some fresh air. So that's really important. And, have the kids run around a little bit. It's really important. And even as us as adults, we just need to walk and move our big muscles. And that also keeps our immune system healthier. Getting great sleep is important as well. And so getting enough sleep, that varies with age, of course. And so most adults need about 7 to 8 hours of good sleep. Kids need a little bit more depending on their activity and their age. So sleep is really important as well. And so the ability to foster good exercise tolerance and sleep can come from nutrition. And again, that's where I go back to, is that's where my biggest focus has often been, is nutrition and how we can use food as medicine. And that's kind of how I think about it. And so a whole food diet is probably the biggest thing that, we can advocate for, I think, as doctors and, anybody who's interacting with families who want to stay healthy. And Whole Foods doesn't have to be really complicated. I think sometimes people think of shopping at Whole Foods, which is really feels expensive or hard. And actually, Whole Foods can simply just mean getting enough fruits and vegetables in the diet. And there's lots of ways to do that. Frozen foods can oftentimes be a really, helpful thing if you can't get fresh food for whatever reason. A lot of farmers markets are, really accessible still, and supporting local business is important. But more importantly, the whole foods that come from, knowing your farmer and just having your kids be part of that selection process is really a fun thing for kids, because they get to feel like they're invested in their own health. But kind of going back again to the whole foods piece of things, I kind of think about whole food as a way to support all the different functions that our body needs. And specifically, when we talk about the immune system, we want to think about the gut. specifically. The gut is where probably 70 to 80% of our immune cells, if you will, and all the functions of our immune system are housed. And so keeping our gut really, really healthy is really important. So one of the things that people can do is think about fermented foods. And fermented foods are things like miso, sauerkraut. Yogurt is fine. Dairy can be sometimes a problem for some people, but when it's fermented, it tends to be better. And it's better tolerated, I would say. So yogurt, kefir, those are the two big ones that people are most familiar with, that incorporating those into the diet, again, is a fermented, food, and it's easier to digest, but it also supports gut health. And there are healthy bacteria in our gut that is what we need to support. And so all these foods support those healthy bacteria in the gut. So those are some simple foods to do that can help, support our gut function. The other thing is high fiber foods. So again, going back to fruits and vegetables. So specifically with fruits, things like apples and pears with the peels are going to be high fiber foods, and that fiber feeds those healthy bacteria in our gut. And vegetables such as spinach and green beans and peas all are high fiber as well. All the dark leafy greens, salad greens and things like that. So those are the fibers that help support our, whole foods, support the gut, sorry. So that's what I wanted to say. So I think the whole food, piece is really important. And that's kind of where I focus on, kind of educating people.
Okay, yes, that sounds very good. Now let's move to the next piece of this. For those of those families out there who may already have gotten infected, what are some things that they can do at home to support the body and support the immune system while it's working hard to get rid of this infection?
Yeah, so I think that, again, making sure that, everybody who might be ill is getting enough rest, and that's important. Staying well hydrated is really important, especially younger children. They tend to forget to drink enough, and so we have to remind them sometimes to drink their water, to drink things like even orange juice, which can have a little bit of extra vitamin C in it. Vitamin C has been shown to be really helpful to support the immune system, especially with viral, kind of illnesses. They can't drink 10 glasses of orange juice a day, but, 1 or 2 glasses a day to get that taste, but also get some extra vitamin C and can be really helpful as well. Zinc has been shown to be specifically important in this COVID-19 virus. And so zinc, again, is going to come from foods, things like the leafy greens. It's going to have that. Seeds and nuts also are high in zinc. If you are a meat eater, there is zinc in meat as well. So, having, those foods as part of the well-rounded diet as supportive for illness can be really helpful to give that extra zinc, as well. And from an herbal perspective, one of the best herbs that I have found for respiratory illnesses, and including, the COVID-19, it's not so much for treatment, but it's a supportive to the immune system to help to kind of ward off the virus and get rid of it a little bit faster. One of my favorite herbs is elderberry, and elderberry is it comes in different forms. There's a black form, and so the elderberry can be taken, preventatively, but I have people take it when they get sick, taking it 3 to 4 times a day. It comes as a liquid for little kids. It tastes really good. The kids love the taste of it. There are lozenges available, and then there are capsules, of course, for adults. So that is one of the kind of mainstays for respiratory illnesses that I often recommend from an herbal perspective.
Yeah, I have heard mixed reports about elderberry. All of them say yes, good for prevention, but some of them say that once you are sick, that it should not be taken. Do you know why they're saying that?
I think it has not really been shown to be a problem with other respiratory illnesses. I think with the COVID-19, there has been, with the coronavirus, there's been concerns that it could release what's called a cytokine storm. So cytokines are chemicals that our body releases when we're dealing with high doses of inflammation, which is what the virus does. And so the cytokine storm seems to come late in the illness for coronavirus or COVID-19. So patients that are already in distress, in respiratory distress, who are often in the hospital. So this is a late phenomenon. This is not the time that we would be using herbal medicine like elderberry anyway. These are patients who are already in the hospital in distress, maybe on the ventilator. So this is not the time that we're using the elderberry. So for patients who are having mild to moderate symptoms, I think it's reasonable if you have a little bit of a cough, if you have a little bit of runny nose, sneezing, just don't feel great, low-grade fever. I think elderberry can be very safely used. And if you're concerned about that, you can certainly talk to, a pediatrician like myself who has that experience to kind of guide that therapy. But elderberry in and of itself does not precipitate the cytokine storm that we.
Okay, that's really good to know. Let me ask you a little bit about fevers, because as we know, fever is the innate response of the body when
Right.
there is an invader, and the rise in the temperature is what actually kills the virus or the bacteria. But there is a point where the fever needs to be allowed, and there's a point where maybe we need to start intervening to see if we can bring it down. Can you give an idea for parents of at what point they actually need to intervene or call the pediatrician, and what's safe to allow to happen to their kids?
Yeah, that's a great question. And, fever is always a concern to parents. And, it's one of those things that we get really nervous about as parents. And even me with my education that I've had for many years, when my daughter was younger and had a fever for, 5-6 days, it started to make me nervous. So I get, how concerning that can be. And the reality of fever is, like you said, it is the body's natural defense mechanism against infections, and whether that be a viral infection or a bacterial infection. But it is what we want to look at is not so much the number, of the fever. That is, it's important, but it's the least important of things, actually. We want to look at how the child is acting. Are they acting, okay? Are they responding to the parents okay? Are they responding to you as a parent really well? If they're doing those things and they're drinking well, the number of the fever may not matter so much. Now, the younger the child, if they're less than the age of, 3 to 4 months of age and they've got a fever, then you need to be in contact with your doctor to make sure that we're not missing something else that may be more serious. But older babies and, certainly young children can tolerate fevers for several days without it being a problem. So in terms of treating fevers, I don't usually recommend treating a fever if the child is tolerating it well, in the sense that they're not super crabby and they're not fussy and they're not crying all the time and they're drinking well and they're not in pain. Then I think we can just let the fever run, even if it's 102, 103, 104. That sounds like a terrible number, but that number is not as important as how the child is acting. And that's a really important facet to think about. Now, for a child who is, refusing fluids, not urinating well, it's just so fussy that they can't get that rest that they also need, then I think it's reasonable to think about maybe using something like Tylenol or ibuprofen. But those are also things that can upset the gut, affect the liver. So we want to use those things judiciously and use them when they're needed. And there is some concern that if you constantly suppress a fever, that you're going to prolong the illness also. So I think there's a balance of, kind of making sure that we use treatment when necessary, but at the same time letting the fever run a little bit so that the body can do what it needs to do.
Yes, that's a great answer. Dr. Dhanu, one more question.
Yeah.
This is regarding appetite, because a lot of times kids lose their appetite when they're sick, and the parents go crazy saying, my kid is not eating, my kid is not eating.
Right.
And I know that the body is trying to conserve energy for the healing process, so the body doesn't want to spend the energy in the digestive process, and that's sometimes the reason why the child is not hungry. Is it okay to just let a child, as long as they're drinking fluids, not eat for a couple of days? Parents go crazy with that, but is that safe to do?
Yeah, I think that, oftentimes we define our success as parents as how well we fed our children. So
Yes.
I think that is where we get a little bit stuck. But, I think we have to think about ourselves too. When we don't feel good, we don't necessarily want to eat a large quantity of food. We don't want to eat heavy food. So I would say to parents that, yes, it is okay to let them go a couple of days without, some solid nutrition, if you will, as long as they're drinking well. Sometimes smoothies can be a great way to kind of bridge that gap between, liquid nutrition and solid nutrition. So sometimes just blending a simple smoothie that has maybe a couple of fruits and vegetables in it, and whether it be coconut milk or, if you want to use yogurt as your base, you can certainly do that. There's lots of recipes and online resources for smoothies. Sometimes kids will really like that idea of doing a milkshake type of thing versus others, and they can get some calories in that way. But a few days of, non-caloric intake is not a big deal for kids when they're not feeling well. And I've often had the experience where kids have been sick for, a while, and it takes them maybe 4 or 5 days, even up to a week, to regain their appetite. And that's completely okay. And just, if you think back to how you feel when you don't feel great, you don't want to eat a lot either. And that's really okay.
Yes. Okay. I love that answer. Thank you so much. Is there any last minute advice that you want to give?
As far as last minute advice, not really so much last minute, but I would encourage people to think about, using their kitchen and their food as medicine. And so we talked a little bit about that with the gut health and bringing in whole foods and, high fiber foods. But I would also think about your kitchen, spices, and spices are really relevant to keeping our bodies healthy as well. And so kind of think about what you have in your spice cabinet. So one of my favorite, herbs in terms of spices is turmeric, which is a great anti-inflammatory, kind of herb. It's a yellow spice that's often used in Indian cooking and Mediterranean cooking. Turmeric has a little bit of a bitter flavor to it, so I don't encourage people to use a ton of it if you're not used to using it. But again, lots of recipes and lots of online resources about how to use turmeric. But turmeric is really great. We know garlic and ginger are great tasting, but they're really great anti-inflammatory spices to use. So use them liberally in your cooking. For respiratory type of illnesses, sage and thyme, which are more Western and Mediterranean herbs, can be really great for, things like coughs and for respiratory congestion. So those can be made as a tea. And again, cooking with those things can be really helpful for supporting the respiratory symptoms, which is a lot of what we deal with. And specifically with coronavirus, it's not treatment again, but it is a way to support the immune system in terms of the respiratory health of our, ourselves.
Mm-hmm. Listening to you talk, I'm reminded of a sentence that I read a long time ago that said, when diet is right, medicine is of no need. When diet is wrong, medicine is of no use.
Yeah.
And that highlights the importance of what you eat.
Yeah, I agree. And, if you go back to the ancient physician Hippocrates, that was one of the things that he said, let thy food be thy medicine. And I think it's really relevant to how I practice and what I encourage people to think about. You've got tools in your kitchen that can be used easily to support your health and well-being.
Yes. Well, Dr. Dhanu, I am so thankful to you for being here today and for giving all of this great information to our families out there in our community. I will get in touch with you again so that we can do that other interview with Dr. Valerie. And for now, have a great afternoon and thanks again.
Great. Thank you so much, Dr. Alterman. I appreciate it. Have a good afternoon.